I'm Blaine Carter, and together we're going to be exploring the what, why, and how of open source technologies.
This is a quick video on how to use utPLSQL to test your PL/SQL code in your continuous integration, development, or deployment pipelines. These instructions should work for most CI/CD type tools. You can see here I'm using Oracle's Developer Cloud Service build tool, which is Hudson. And you can see here that I have already created a dummy job that we'll use as our next step in our simulated pipeline. This job simply echoes out howdy world to the terminal, so nothing fancy in there. And so we'll get started by clicking on new job. We'll give it a name. We'll call it utPLSQL. Click save. Most of these tabs in the configuration panel I'm going to skip and just leave as the defaults and jump right over to build steps. I'm going to add a build step. It's going to be the invoke SQL CL build step, and we're going to connect as DD tests, which is my testing schema. I'm going to enter in my super secret password. We're going to give it a connect string. And if you were doing something a little more complicated, you might call a SQL file, but I'm just doing inline SQL. So I'm going to just copy and paste in the SQL that I'm going to use right there. You can see I'm just setting the server output off, turning feedback on, and then spooling my results out to a results.xml file. And then when I execute the utPLSQL run command, I'm going to tell it to use this formatter, which will format the output in a JUnit style format. And that's good for our build step. That'll get it done. What we want to do after that happens is, in order to integrate it with the build tool, we want to publish the JUnit test results to the result report. And for that, since we spooled it out to the file called results.xml, we just put the name of the file in there, and we want to retain the long standard output error, organize test output by parent location, and then when assuming everything is good, we want to build the next job in the pipeline, so we'll select a dummy job. And so with just that, that's enough of the setup to get it to execute our tests, and then assuming everything passes, call the dummy job in the next as the next step of the pipeline. However, I like to also be able to download my results file, so I'm going to archive the artifacts as well. Just check that box, put that in there. I'm going to hit save. Everything looks good. I'm going to hit build now and let it start. You can see up here that the new build is queued. I'm going to jump back out to the job overview panel so you can see that the job is queued, and then it should kick off any second now. All right, there it goes. You do have the ability, if you click on this right here, to watch the console output as it builds. So what it's doing, I didn't attach it to any type of a Git repository or anything, so it's not going to check out any code, but it will just establish the connection to the database. Then it will execute the commands that we told it to execute, and then spool the results out. And so right now it's doing all of its connections in the background, making sure everything's nice secure connections. We like to have our stuff secure. So there it's connected. It's executing our command. Then of course once that's done, it's got to collect up the file and archive it like I asked it to, and integrate it back into the test results tab that I'll show you here in just a second. And then assuming at that point everything works, then it will kick off the next job in the build queue. So let's jump back out to the jobs overview panel so we can watch that part happen. All right, there you go. You can see that that job has finished and everything registered as good, and so it automatically queued up the dummy job to run next. So let's drop back into our job And you can see that since we tied the output of the tests, we linked it into the test results of the build tool, we now get this neat little button over here that lets us go in and look at our tests. So you can see here we ran 3 tests, none of them failed or were skipped. The total test run time was 23 seconds. That's the amount of time that it took for the actual test to run. That doesn't count setup and teardown of the rest of the environment. If you want to drill down into the individual tests, you can click here. You can see the 3 tests that ran, how long they took, and that they were passed, and then drill down in further into an individual test. So let's jump back out here, and then I'm going to switch over onto my other screen, compile a piece of code real quick that will make the tests fail, and I'm going to build it again. Go back out here. So while that's queuing up and getting ready to run, you can see that our tests ran. After that ran, it queued up the dummy job, and then that ran, and that was a successful run. So you would take this basically sequence of events and insert it into wherever you want to test your code in your pipeline. And so this time when it runs, it's going to fail, and I'll show you what happens with that. Alright, it looks like it's running. Let's jump back into the console to watch the output. Once again, right now it's setting up our environment. Then it's connected to the database. Then it's running our tests. And then it has gone through and generated out all the results. Let's jump back out to the build. Looks like it's just finishing up the housekeeping. Remember, once it's done, it has to archive off the artifacts up here. So this is where you could go to download the file. But you can see that since the test failed, you can see down here a graph showing the passed and failed. It will set the status to unstable. And if we go back into that little test button there, you can see 3 tests, 1 of them failed. We can drill down in to the failed test, and you can see here that it returned 29 when it should have returned 0, counting of course as a failure. Let's jump back out to the job overview, and let's see, I might have to refresh my screen. Sometimes when I jump around too much, I click too quickly. But you can see here that that one stopped, and it did not run the next job in the pipeline, because if the tests fail, there's really no reason to continue on in my scenario. So that's an example of how to integrate utPLSQL in and demonstrating what happens when it's successful, and also demonstrating what happens when it's failed. So I hope you find that useful. If you liked the video, please subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitter, all of that good stuff, and thank you for spending your time with me.